now that he stepped down from power, should we salute the strength, the courage, and the indefatigability of Fidel Castro?
Now that he's stepped down from power, should we salute the strength, courage, and indefatigability, words once used by Mr. Galloway, of Fidel Castro? About somebody else. George Galloway.
Well, I think Fidel Castro is one of the greatest men of the 20th century. He made it into the 21st century. He defied the most powerful and aggressive state on the earth, just 75 miles away from Cuba, which made hundreds of attempts to kill him. He has survived assassination attempts, invasion attempts, subversion, terrorism of all kinds. And yet, despite a blockade lasting nearly 50 years, Cuba has achievements which any person in this country would be proud of, never mind a third world country that just 50 years ago was merely a bordello, a casino for the criminal classes in the United States of America. A child born in Cuba lives longer than a child born in Washington, D.C. The infant mortality rates are better than the US, the life expectancy is better than the US, and the health system, as if you've seen Michael Moore's wonderful movie Sicko, will show you, is as good as Scandinavian health services. What an achievement for a third world country. Okay. Viva Fidel!
Yeah. Well, now, before you go out on that cheer, what you said about the strength, the courage, and indefatigability was, of course, about Saddam Hussein in your famous filmed bit with him in Iraq. The Prime Minister said today there can be no defense against the abuse of democratic rights in any country, talking about Castro. Do you think he was right?
No, because when we were threatened and besieged when Hitler was at the Channel ports, we suspended all sorts of democratic and civil liberties, because when you're under a state of siege, threatened with invasion by the most powerful force on the earth, just a few miles away, it's bound to distort the political process. But democracy is not just about the system by which you elect your leaders, it's also about the outcome of what your leaders actually do. And Cuba has a great story to tell. But I'm in favor of democracy in Cuba, and the best way to get it is for the United States to lift the blockade, promise it will never invade Cuba again, stop funding terrorist enemies of Cuba based in Miami, Florida, stop kowtowing to that emigre lobby in US presidential elections, and normalize their relations with one of their closest neighbors.
Okay. Nicholas Stephen, do you think Castro should be saluted for his strength and courage?
No, I don't. I take pretty much the equal and opposite view to George on this one. And my heroes of the 20th century in terms of politics are people like John F. Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy. And I've got a lot of respect for the United States of America. I do not have too much respect for some of the more recent Republican presidents, but I have a lot of respect for those individuals. And you've got to remember, Fidel Castro was a dictator who ruled for a very long period of time, who has passed power on to his brother. That's not the sort of country that I want to live in.
Unlike the United States, where it's father to son.
Well, the abuse of human rights, well, a fair point, but the difference, George, is that there were things called elections, and that people had the democratic chance
not in Florida
to exercise their right.
Okay.
You can challenge the elections.
Bush was elected 5-4 by the Supreme Court.
The important thing to remember in all of this, George, is that the United States of America and what's happening at the moment with Barack Obama, for example, I think has great hope for the future of this planet. Fidel Castro was in charge with, I think, probably the most serious incident of the 20th century that could have been catastrophic to the future of this planet, namely the Cuban Missile Crisis. And that was, in my view, the fault of the Russians and the Cubans, not the Western world.
The year before.
You, sir.
America invaded Cuba.
Hold on, George.
I'd just like to echo what George is saying. The Cuban government have presided over the most training of doctors in the whole of Latin America and in the greater third world. Free education for everybody from 5 upwards, including university, which not every Western country can also claim. And they've done this during a blockade from the largest superpower that this world has. If Fidel Castro and the government had been permitted to run the country without the blockade there, how strong could they have been now?
All right. Annabel Gilday, there was a motion in the House of Commons signed by quite a number of Labour MPs, one Liberal Democrat, no Tories or SNP, commending Fidel Castro's achievements. Would you commend his achievements? Do you think he had strength and courage?
It's quite interesting listening to the self-proclaimed Democrat over here in the form of George Galloway and thinking of some of the company he keeps. And it seems to me that some of the company he keeps and
I've
he
won a
may
lot more
curious.
elections than you, Annabelle.
Well, that's your judgment, George.
No, it's a
as
fact.
I say,
It's just a fact.
You represent, as I understand, a split party now, but you no doubt deserve marks for
Come on,
heroism.
let's get to that.
Heroism
Keep
for going.
Annabelle.
But
Stop the cheap point scoring and go to the expensive point scoring.
What I was going to say, David, was that it seems to me, I mean, perversely, that the decision by Fidel Castro now to step down at least start a transition of power elsewhere and hopefully now give way to the embryonic creation of democracy is actually, frankly, the most hopeful thing that could have happened to Cuba in the last few decades. And I certainly think that the United Kingdom, that the United States of America are interested in trying to assist Cuba with its fledgling democracy. And I think that offers Cuba more hope than anything else has offered it in the last 40 or 50 years.
Cathy Jamison.
Well, I've been in Cuba a couple of times in the past few years, and it strikes me that there will be many things that the Cuban people will want to retain about the way things have operated up until now. But I got a sense in talking to people, particularly some of the younger people, that they did want to have a different sort of relationship with the wider world. They wanted the opportunity to travel, they wanted the opportunity to see more people from across the world going to Cuba. And I hope that, you know, the new regime will bring democracy in Cuba. It will give the opportunity for the Cuban people to take forward those issues that they want to, and that we will see a changing relationship with the rest of the world.
Would you have signed this motion if you had been in the House of Commons?
I have to confess, David, that I have not seen the exact wording of it, therefore I don't know.
Well, it commends his achievements.
Well, I think there are some things that I think that the Cubans have done well. There are other areas where I think we would question, perhaps in some of the human rights issues and so on, where I would be less keen to support.
Nicola Sturgeon.
Well, you know, I think the way most of us feel about the current American administration, and I stress administration, this is not about the American people, and how some of us have felt about some previous administrations, it's difficult not to have a sort of secret admiration for somebody who has withstood that for so long and in such difficult circumstances. I've not had the privilege of visiting Cuba in the past, so, you know, I'm only speaking from second-hand knowledge here, but people that I know who have been in Cuba, yeah, they do talk about some of the progress in terms of public services, but they don't quite paint as rosy a picture of life in Cuba as I think we've just heard from George. I think there is another side to that, and I suspect Cathy is right, that there are people in Cuba who now want to have a different relationship with the world. I think the most important thing now is that the people of Cuba get to decide their future. It's fine for some of us to sit here in a studio in Stirling and talk about it, but it's the people of Cuba who should get to decide, and they should get to decide without the interference of America as well.
Brief point, if you would. Yes, you. And then I come to the lady at the very back there, and then we must stop, I'm afraid. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's almost quite cheeky actually what you're saying, that there needs to be more hope in Cuba. Certainly, considering how good the health service is, it's supposed to be one of the best in the world.
Have you been there?
Yeah, I have.
You have?
I have.
And
yeah.
you're a supporter of Castro?
I am. Yeah.
Okay. And you at the very back, the lady in green or blue? Yes.
Don't you think it would be a good idea if we asked the Americans to close down and remove themselves from Guantanamo Bay?
Very brief point from you, sir. Yes, the man there in the green, in the yellow shirt, yes.
Thank you. I'd just like to take this opportunity to salute George Galloway's indefatigability.
Right. We'll just stop there. It's our hour. From all of us in Stirling this Thursday. Good night.
Andrew Neil opens his book of secrets, and Duncan James on bullying. Stay with us for This Week next on BBC One.